welcome to the dungeon with Harlan and Andrew.
Cool. Hi, hello. We're live here today. It's a Sunday, doing a little one-off stream here.
Special episode.
Special.
Oh, we had to, because,
Yeah, we have a very special guest today. So This is the Dungeon. It's a show where we talk about all things running games, and I'm Harlan Kelly.
And I'm Andrew Overdahl, and we have a special matinee episode because our guest is coming to us from Sweden. So it's morning where we are, but nighttime where he is. Please welcome Niklas Wistedt.
Woo!
Hey guys.
To the show. Also known as Paths Peculiar on Instagram. Which is amazing map art and traps and things like that. So thank you so much for doing the show. We're honored to have you. Also, just a little point of trivia, Niklas drew the Occupied Hex logo that pops up sometimes on this stream.
Oh dang, cool. I didn't know that. That's
hexagon.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So you can give him money and for something cool. That's an option. That's an option that you should do. But I guess right off the gate, the first question we like to ask guests is, what is your kind of personal history with tabletop role-playing games?
Yeah, so I grew up I was born in late 70s. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s in Sweden. Back then, there was this huge boom with tabletop role-playing games. Local ones, actually. Dungeons and Dragons wasn't really big in Sweden until quite late. So there were some local young guys who got inspired, of course, from the American tabletop hobby, and they created their own games, and those just exploded when I was a kid. So they became hugely popular, mainly among boys, teenage boys. So when I was growing up, like my friends' older brothers were playing these role-playing games, and me and the other annoying little brats wanted to join in because we found it so cool with all the dice and all the monsters and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where I got into it. Me and a couple of 100,000 other Swedish boys during the 80s and 90s.
Nice.
And then, I've always been interested. So when I was old enough, I got my own box set, started DMing my friends. And I've always been into, fantasy stuff. When I was growing up, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe were my favorite toys. This whole, science fantasy, Frazetta, barbarian stuff was huge for me growing up. So, and I never really grew up. I just kept playing into my 20s and 30s and 40s. So yeah, that's it's been pretty much a lifelong hobby since I was maybe 8 or 10 years old, something like that.
Nice.
That's so
and
cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but sorry, go ahead, Harlan.
Yeah, I just love that there was you started with a different version of it that was interpreted by just people being excited and jumping straight into it. Is there anything that you remember about some of those earlier versions that stands out as something you still use or you miss about the game?
Yeah, it was the big fantasy role-playing game when I was growing up was, as I said, a Swedish local game called Drakar and Demoner, which means something like dragons and demons. So it was kind of a rip-off from Dungeons and Dragons.
Cool.
But at the same time, it wasn't. It was a completely different rule system. It was based on basic role-playing. I think it was based on RuneQuest or something like that. So and to be perfectly honest, the rule set wasn't really good, and most of it we didn't really understand. We made up shit all the time. We read all these charts and these kind of complex rules, and when we didn't get it, we just made up stuff ourselves. So it's not much to remember about the rules, but then again, there were a lot of cool adventures and stuff like that. That's of course unique to that game, and you can't get it for Dungeons and Dragons. And those kind of adventures are still something that I will always be influenced by the early adventures of like 80s.
What's one of them? Like, what's one of those adventures that's like not available for Dungeons and Dragons that like sticks in your head as like a very important moment, or like the coolest adventure or whatever?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was one that was called like the tomb of Hans Sarkath or something. I mean, these were not. I mean, by our standards, these were kind of basic stuff.
Yeah.
But they were so cool. And was the one that was called like the Island of Mists or something like. It was cheesy like hell, but it was fun. I mean, we had so much fun. It was a completely new world that opened up for us.
Yeah, that stuff
then,
still
of
sticks
course-
in your head. Like when you're
Yeah,
like
they
when you're a
do.
kid, it always sticks there, kind of like, and as you
Yeah,
expand out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I
the-
also remember that like the old illustrations from those rule books and adventures. I mean, when I see those illustrations today, I get like super nostalgic, of course, because they influenced me a lot growing up. So and you know these classic, old school role playing game illustrations, black and white fantasy stuff, and I mean, I'm still really invested in that kind of style of illustrations. I think they have a lot of charm.
Totally. Were those early Swedish games, were those more influenced by Norse mythology, or was it still the more Arthurian mythology or the Tolkien mythology?
Well, to some extent, I think Tolkien was probably the biggest influence, which is, I mean, Tolkien is a bit of a mix between Arthurian and actually Norse mythology, since he was a professor within like Norse mythology and languages. So I think Tolkien was probably the biggest influence, but also, I mean, still the old sword and sorcery stuff like Elric and Conan and Fafhrd and Grey Mouser. I remember even the cover image was for the Swedish game was Michael Whelan's Elric illustration, the green one. So and we didn't really know who Elric was back then, but so yeah, sword and sorcery was always a big influence as well.
That's
Nice.
awesome.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Sweden still has like a cool RPG scene now, right? Like, isn't Free League or Free League based out of
Free League.
Sweden? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for some reason, I mean, since the hobby was so big in the 80s, I mean, literally everyone was playing in the 80s, or a lot of people at least. And I mean, those guys, or we who were kids back then, we're now in our 30s, 40s, even 50s, and we kind of have the resources to keep up this hobby and actually publish stuff. And some of the creators out there are really, really good. So yeah, we have seen in the latest years, we've seen quite a few successful Swedish games that are making it on the international scene, and they win a lot of NEs and stuff. So Free League has released, for example, the Alien. They got the Alien license actually to produce the Alien role-playing game, and some of that stuff as well, and a few fantasy games as well that have become quite big overseas.
Yeah, I run an Alien game and I run their Tales from the Loop game. They're both pretty fun. Cool. Yeah. It's such like an easy system. That's like the system I like to use to for someone who's never played a role-playing game before. That Free League system is so easy, where it's like you just have a pool of D6s and any sixes, good news, you did it. So yeah, that's super easy.
Kind of streamlined.
Speaking of really cool black and white classic art, that's like your that's kind of your specialty, right? On Instagram, your Pat's Peculiar, you do maps and traps and things like that. I was wondering, I guess first to get into maps, what, in your opinion, what makes a great map? Like I've dabbled in drawing maps, and a lot of times I can just tell by looking at them, like, this map sucks. Like this, I didn't do what I wanted to do with this map. In your experience, what makes a good map? Like when you can finally cap the pen, you're like, this is a good map. Like what are some of the ingredients you look for?
I mean, there are a couple of things. I think the most common beginner's mistake that I think a lot of us do in the beginning when we start out drawing maps for adventures is that we tend to draw very linear maps. So I mean, you're trying to create a dungeon, and you want, of course, a dungeon to be this sprawling system of corridors and rooms, and kind of like the labyrinth of the Minotaur or whatever it might be. But when we start out doing maps, it's really easy to make them too linear. So it's actually, I mean, yes, it's a dungeon, but it's no longer a labyrinth, because it's most of the time it's just one path with very few kind of choices to make along the road. So what I try to kind of force myself when I plan out the dungeon, or when I do the basic layout, I try to ask myself, okay, do we have, do I provide enough choice for the players navigating this dungeon? Are there real choices to be made here, is it just a long corridor with rooms branching off from it? So you're still going to do it in pretty much a linear way. So I think that's probably the most common mistake I see. And then another thing that I think, and this is a bit of a question of preference, but a type of dungeon that tend to bore me is dungeons that are too realistic. So, and I know a lot of like role-playing guys, they want to do historically correct stuff. They want to do things that make sense. The problem is that things that make sense isn't really that interesting all the time, according to me. So, I mean, instead of trying to do something that's very functional and practical, I think it's good to kind of let your imagination roam a bit. So, I mean, not every room needs to be a square or a rectangle. I mean, you can play around a lot with shapes. You can play around with different kind of more fantastic features, making sure that there's something, at least something interesting in every part of the dungeon. So it's not like, okay, you're entering room 9, it's also a square, it's a bit of rubble, but there's nothing else there. So I mean, there's so much stuff you can play around with, especially playing D&D. I mean, all the kind of inspiration you can get. I mean, you can fill stuff with torture chambers and magical fountains and dark altars, and so I think that's one thing that separates a good dungeon from a mediocre dungeon, is that you provide enough interesting features that the players will remember it. So they can, instead of saying we go back to the third room, they say no, we go back to the room with the fog and this crazy statues or whatever it might be.
Man, that's
Totally.
such. I
That's a
love that.
great
It's just
way
like
of
a
putting it.
little bit of advice too. Is like thinking about what the players will call the room when you leave
Yeah.
it, or like
Yeah,
note that in your
exactly,
head. That's
exactly that.
such. Oh man, that I feel like I'm already in my brain and started spinning like
Yeah.
things I wanted to do from that, because it's such a little like easy way to think about what the players are ingesting and like gonna hold on to without it being like, it doesn't need to be something huge and like complicated, but just having like the room with the giraffe in it, and then like the room with the mist
Yeah.
in it, or what, like whatever.
I mean, if you can't come up with a visual thing, then at least, I mean, give the room a smell. It smelled like sulfur. It smelled like, I don't know,
Totally.
damp molds, anything that kind of sticks out and separates the room from the rest of the dungeon.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to
Yeah,
be
that
big.
is a great note.
I love that.
Do you have a map you'd like to show us? We could like roam around on one of your maps.
Yeah, sure. We can have a look at a map I'm working on right now. I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can share my screen here.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see.
And we have a question we can kind of inject in right now. A lot of times we save questions till the end, but if they're kind of like relevant to the very specific moment, we could do it right now.
Yeah, go ahead.
This Twitch user asked if I lost my chat pop-up, so I'm gonna have to
Oh,
paraphrase.
I've got it. I've
something.
got it.
Okay,
Yeah, it's.
yeah.
Do you have a specific approach to escapes, turning tail or secret hatches, like a way to introduce a future fight for the players?
You mean like escaping from if you run into monsters that are too tough?
Yeah, or like I think also for bad guys as well. I think that's the thing we've talked about on the show a little bit
Oh,
before.
yeah,
Is like
right.
having bad guys run away, or
Yeah.
I like that too as well, of like ways for players to get out. You know, if they're in trouble.
Yeah, certainly. And I think this is something that it's a question that's bigger than just the map of the dungeon, because this is also an approach to dungeon adventures and D&D adventures. I think most of us tend to kind of forget that not every fight should be to the death.
Yeah.
I mean, most sentient creature doesn't want to die. So if a fight is going wrong for them, they will. I mean, most people will run away from a fight that's not gonna end well. So definitely that's something I think you should plan for when you're writing an adventure. And I mean, some of the older D&D rule sets, they actually have morale for all opponents. You will roll morale if he drops to, I don't know, half hit points, something like that. You'll see if the bad guy will run away. But also, I mean, this is something you can write into the adventure, even if you don't have rules supporting it from the edition of D&D you're playing at the moment. But and then again, when you're layouting the dungeon, and this comes back to what I said about non-linear dungeons, if you have multiple choices of routes to take, you will also kind of naturally have ways for a big bad evil guy to run away or retreat, and also for the players to retreat.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
again, avoiding the linear dungeon, giving players a choice to navigate kind of the ecosystem you build in the dungeon.
I love that.
That makes sense?
And just
Yeah, absolutely.
Just looking at this map that you shared, just instantly you're like, oh, I want to explore this dungeon. There's all these like little details, and just you can just tell like you could spend some great time looking around in here. I love it.
Yeah, and this is kind of the style I like to do. And I mean, some would argue that this is overkill, that it's just too much details. But since I don't write a lot, I'm a visual artist. So to me, this kind of is a substitute for writing as well. So by adding visual detail to the dungeon, lets me kind of build my storytelling around a visual element rather than writing long text. So
Totally.
that's why I tend to do like this. I'm really into storytelling, so I want that to be kind of reflected in the stuff I draw. So if we have a look at this map, and this map is actually a quite fun little project, because during the Corona crisis, I understood, I mean, sitting at home all the time, I realized that I need to do some working out because I was gaining a bit of weight. So I started running, and then I kind of made this map for myself. So every time I go out for a run, I can draw a new room to the dungeon. So this has been going on for a while. So this is a personal project. I'm not sure I'm going to publish it or whatever I'm going to do with it, but yeah. So
I love that though. I love that like you're doing it one room at a time and rewarding yourself with it. That's a good like life TM tip almost.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, but that also means that I don't really have a plan for this map. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it just we'll see where it takes me. But yeah, it's fun. But as you can see here, what I'm trying to do here is to do something that's very non-linear, I'd say. So I mean, there's so many different routes you can take. And even secret doors and stuff like that. And I try also to play around a bit with elevation. So you can see here stairs are going down. You go through this crazy room with the stone faces yelling at each other, and then you actually go under this corridor here. So I think that's also something we tend to draw dungeon maps quite flat, so we don't take elevation into consideration. So I think that's something that, I mean, it doesn't really affect the gameplay that this part is below this part, but still it gives a little bit of variety. So just by saying to the players, you going down a flight of steps here, they feel that, okay, we're going downwards, and down is usually bad. In Dungeons and Dragons context. So yeah, just by giving a little stuff like that. And this thing in the middle here is a big rusty iron wheel with a keyhole in it.
God, I want to turn it so bad. I want to turn it so
exactly,
bad.
but
I've been
it's
staring
locked,
at it this whole time.
But I mean, the player's probably gonna figure out that this is probably connected to the big stone door here. So if they can find the key and turn the wheel, they're going to be able to progress further. And I think it's good to drop hints like this, drop little teasers, so that, okay, we've seen that big door and it's got stone carving, weird carvings, or whatever. This is probably important.
Yeah, man, I love how
dropping that early on.
I love how this is like, we've talked a bunch on here too about like adventure hooks, and like ways to coax the players, and like by listening to them and things like that, and using backstory. But this is such exactly what you said, like visual storytelling, because you can we can just look at this map and immediately there's like 3 adventure hooks there. There's like a coffin.
Totally.
What's going on there? Like this, I want to turn this wheel so bad. Like all the things are like pushing the players to do things and to find a reason to do it. That's awesome.
And touches like the broken stonework there in that central pit room. It's just another great detail of like, do you think you could make that jump and maybe take a shortcut or fall in and down into the pit or
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is it even a shortcut? The players doesn't know, but still, it will make them feel like, okay, there's probably something more important over here because it's harder to get there.
Yeah.
Which might be true. It might also not be true, of course. But just giving them a little bit of variety. They can either take the simple route here. They understand early on. I mean, you don't even have to tell them that this is something important. You just say that there's a big iron wheel. You can't turn it because it's locked. You can see a big stone door on the other side of the gap here. Already there, they're gonna realize that one of our goals is to find the key for the big iron wheel, and you don't even have to tell them that that's something important. They're gonna figure that out by themselves.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. I like this room. What's this circular room with it looks like eyes in it?
Yeah, with the eyes. I haven't really thought that one through yet, but
I love it anyway.
I have some kind of idea that it's something like Lovecraftian Cthulhu thingy here. So if you stay outside of the circle, I mean outside the inner circle, you're fine. But if you step inside, something bad's gonna happen.
Man,
great.
So either
Love
trial and error or they figure that out. So, but yes, something's bad's gonna happen there.
I love it.
Yeah.
So how I came to discover you did a trap that was covered. I wish I could remember the website that covered it, but you had this delightfully fiendish trap, and I found that, and that's how I found your Instagram. I believe it was the trap. I think there was like a stone ball that comes out, and where you think you're ducking to safety, it's actually part of the trap.
Probably this
and
one, right?
Oh yeah, this is it. And I loved this trap and all your subsequent traps. So I was curious if you could maybe walk us a bit through your trap philosophy as well. I think that a solid trap is one of the most underused and underappreciated things of Dungeons and Dragons, because I think as a DM, you're like, at least me personally, I'm like, well, I don't want to put all this work into the trap. If they're going to get a great investigation roll and solve it, then I've just spent all this time. I just get lazy. There's not really a better excuse for it. But
and they're hard to make
like
traps narrative. It's hard to make traps like tell a story, But I think like just looking at this one right here, it does immediately. Yeah. Will you just talk us through this trap?
Yeah.
I would love to just
sure.
hear more about this one.
Absolutely. I get to be honest, I get so much hate online for some of the traps I've made. When I post them, people are like, you're the worst fucking DM ever.
No.
Say this and this shit's never going to be fun for players because it's just a total party kill and they can't do anything. And I mean, they have a point. I mean, this is sadistic as shit, of course, but it's also a bit tongue-in-cheek, I would say. I mean, this is something you would run if you have a gaming group that would actually appreciate these.
Totally. And like you say right here in the language, you just say a successful save, you can lower that DC. Like you can make it so they will have a near-death experience, but probably not wipe as a party. So
no, exactly.
Or that like players can see how maniacal the trap is, but still be able to, have a few chances to roll their way out of it.
Like how foreboding, knowing that the evil mind behind this is waiting for them after the trap. Yeah, that's a great point. Even if they don't even trigger it, knowing that it would have killed them all is great foreshadowing.
Yeah, and I think kind of the thing with maps also is it can really slow down a game. It could grind it down to a halt, because if you overuse traps, then the player is going to get too careful, and that's on you as a DM to kind of control that. And again, it depends also. I mean, you need to know your group. They need to understand that, okay, when Niklas is DMing, we better fucking search for traps, because this is something that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right. But that's like,
as you say.
Yeah, that's your players having experience, knowing you, and like you communicating well as a DM. Like, hey, there are usually traps in my dungeon. Like, be sure and check.
Yeah, and as you say, you can really be foreboding as well. I mean, let them discover a couple of already triggered traps. Then they will realize that okay, this dungeon has this kind of dangers. So when they come to this place in the map, they will kind of realize, okay, why are there alcoves here? There's something fishy going on here. Because why would someone build alcoves and there's nothing in them? There's no statues. There's no reason to have alcoves here. So this should, for an experienced group, this is something that would kind of set off an alarm bell for them to kind of realize that something's going on and we're going to need to tread carefully. And in this case, I mean, the trap itself is, it's a rolling boulder trap. You would open the door here, the boulder would roll down, and if you jump out into the alcoves, you kind of take cover. There's pit traps there with spikes. So it's just nasty. And the worst thing of all is that there's really nothing else behind it. So you just want them to
it's all
even if you survive, there's really nothing.
A true dead end. Yeah. I wonder which would hurt a character more, the big stone boulder or the fall into spikes. Probably the fall into spikes. I don't know. I guess it's up to you. You make the stats.
If you would actually curl up close to the wall, the boulder would probably miss you actually, since it's spherical and it's so maybe if you're clever enough and you can actually get away. But then again, also, I mean, it depends a lot which kind of game you're playing. I don't play Dungeons & Dragons 5 5th edition, but from what I get, player characters are quite robust. They can take a beating.
Yeah.
And they have saves and all that stuff, and perception checks and stuff like that. I mainly play older versions of Dungeons & Dragons where you don't have any skill checks or anything. So that's up to the player to kind of figure out that, okay, well, we want to search in the alcoves here, we want to do this and that, because there's really no skill check to save you here. It's and probably not a save either. So that's kind of more on player skill rather than character skills. And every version of Dungeons & Dragons has their own kind of quirks, and I like the old ones because they're really rules light, and it's up to the players to kind of make to kind of beat the dungeon.
I love that.
So yeah. So that's
cool.
That's
such a good trap.
That's pretty much that trap. This was the first one I did, and also to say, when I was growing up, there was this book called Grimtooth's Traps.
Oh yeah, I know Grimtooth. Yeah.
Yeah. So and I think that was actually translated to Swedish. So when I was a kid, I was so into Grimtooth. I was going through that all the time. I thought it was so cool. So Grimtooth have of course been a very big inspiration when I did my series of traps.
Yeah, I mean, those two. This is nice compared to a lot of those. But
yeah, those were nasty.
But those are still like they have a lot of pieces to them like this that you can see is an encounter by itself. Like, sure, if you stick your hand in this lock, it will like chomp your arm off, but it first locks your arm in place and then like the thing starts or whatever. So you can see all of like the DM building the moment with the players where they're like going through the process, and then they're like trying to do this, and they're like, what if I do that, and can I try this? So I feel like this has the same thing where it doesn't mean like oh, I got you, the party's just done. It's more of like, okay, here are all these different moments where the player's going to have a chance to do something.
Yeah, exactly. And it got some interesting mechanics to it, because I mean, of course you could just put a pit trap in the corridor and people fall down and die, and that of course would make the most sense, I guess. Again, not everything has to be realistic. I mean, the person who built this one, I don't know, some kind of evil necromancer, megalomaniac, whatever it is. I mean, he's obviously insane. He could have gone for a simple trapdoor, but instead he built this monstrosity just because, I don't know, for the hell of it. So
well, he only built one part, and then he went on a run, and then he built another part, and then he went on a run. So
exactly.
But it also just torments the party, like having even a few members fall into they thought that they ducked to safety, they fell, they got hurt, somebody else got hurt by the boulder. It's like now we're all very hurt and we're clearly out of our depth. I think it just makes your players completely reassess the situation post trap of like we're we're in trouble. Like,
Yeah, it tells the story of the bad
do we
guy.
want to stay
Yeah, it does.
in here? Yeah.
Yeah, again, I mean, it's obvious that the guy who built this is a maniac. So I mean, that's a part of the story as well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a roll-20 table that we love to have people roll a d20 on, and we'll ask a question by it. And then if we have any more viewer questions, hit us with them. Give them to us.
Cool. Yeah. So if you,
if you can roll a d20, or we can roll for you.
should I roll a d20?
yeah, well, just we'll use that. You know, like we're talking about old editions of Dungeons and Dragons. We're doing some old school question asking here with letting
cool.
the table letting the table decide what questions
Let me
we're
get my
asking.
dice here.
Andrew, I saw you updated the table too. Some really great new questions on there. I'm excited about. At least number one, the failure.
The new.
So yeah. So.
Oh, let's see here. If you can see.
Boy, this is a nasty dungeon.
see I'm
you got
not
on screen
cheating?
right now. Or the
Can you see it was 15?
15. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
15. Okay. Oh, we have SS1 once before, but
Let's go back to
yeah, I'm curious. When you run games, do you have any tone expectations, like with your players? Do you are you okay with them using anachronisms or like silly stuff, or are you kind of more like, this is the world, this, and the tone of the dungeon?
Yeah. No, I mean, the tone when we play is usually leaning towards kind of the darker side of fantasy. Not very pretentious, more like, I don't know, almost satirically dark at times. And I mean, yeah, we do allow some silliness at the table. I think, I mean, if you're playing for 4 hours, I mean, we're all grown ups. It's hard to concentrate for 4 hours and playing character and stuff like that. So we run more of a beer and pretzel game, I'd say. So, I mean, while we do enjoy playing games, absolutely, we also enjoy hanging out with each other. We're a bunch of friends who's playing, and it's one of the reasons to get together is to game, but also to kind of hang out and have some fun together. So we're not dead serious most of the time. Of course, if there are parts of an adventure where you want to build some tension, even to do kind of leaning on horror themes, then yeah, we tend to be a little bit more serious for those parts. But no, we kind of lean back actually.
Yeah, I feel like you can see that in your map style too. Like I'm totally blown away how much all the things you're saying are just like present in your art. But like you can like just with that last trap or the leap of faith trap, how it like you jump across and it's like the second spot has like a trap there too.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like that's such a like I can see the moment where you're like sitting around at the table and it happens and you kind of like bumping each other on the shoulder or whatever, like, oh my god, I can't believe that happened. Where it's there's bleakness in that of like, oh, you jerk, you got me, but it's also silly, like if you're kind of disconnected from it. Yeah.
It's also a great trap because it specifically punishes the like over impulsive player who's like, every group is already like, oh god, how are we gonna get in trouble? They're like, all right, I jump across. Like someone's like, can I check this? And then someone else is like, I jump across, and they fall into it. It's like, it's just a satisfying moment for the other.
And I really see how, I mean, with some groups, you can't do this because they're going to get pissed off. And of course, my players get pissed off as well, but they laugh about it. So, I mean, they're like, you fucker, but still everyone's laughing around the table. So there are really no hard feelings. Yeah.
And you have the drawing to say, this really is how the trap was designed. Like, it's not just a DM being like, actually, the other side of the trap is also a pit. It's like, fuck you. That's not true.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you have anything that you want to plug? Do you, obviously your Instagram, I put it in chat, but everyone should check it out. Your Instagram is great.
Well, I don't have a project of my own, but for once I actually took on a commission. So I'm working with the guys behind Severed Books. They're a small company from Philadelphia, and they're doing Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition adventure based on the punk rock band from Philadelphia called the Dead Milkmen.
Oh, that's
yeah.
awesome.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
you know them?
I saw that on your Instagram, and I just read about
Yeah.
that project. I was like, oh, this is awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
it's really cool. I've never heard about the Dead Milkmen before. Actually, I think it's more of an American thing. So, but that project sounded so cool, and the guys behind it are really nice. And I really like the adventure. It's corny as hell, but it's fun and it's well written, and it sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm working on that one. It's called Lost Tomb of the Bitching Chimera, and it's on Kickstarter right now. It's a very successful Kickstarter. They raised like 1,000% or even more. So
Yeah, their hit song was "Bitchin' Camaro." So
yeah, exactly.
that's
I heard
yeah.
that one now. I
the
of course
gag.
had to listen to them for a bit when drawing. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Do
That's
you
awesome.
do you have any plans to release a book of your stuff, like kickstart one, or do a book of your maps and traps?
Yeah, maybe. No, I don't. I mean, at some point I want to do it, but I want to do it when it feels right, when I have all the content I need for it, when I feel that it would bring something new to the table. Also, not just publishing my already drawn maps in paper format. So I want to have some kind of idea on how to tie it all together, because I do like to experiment. So I draw a lot of different stuff, but I would need to find some kind of theme to kind of tie the project together. But I don't have any plans right now. Right now, I'm mainly working with my website and making sure that publish a lot of free adventures, free maps, and stuff like that. So if anyone's interested, just go to the website. There's a lot of free stuff there. So just browse around. And,
Cool. And what is the website?
it's wistedt.net.
We'll snag it from
can put it
your
in here.
Twitter, and
Yeah.
we'll post it on our socials too, because that's so cool.
Yeah.
You're just like putting stuff out for people for free. That's awesome, and your work is amazing. So
Thank
Spelled it
you.
wrong
yeah.
in chat. I apologize.
And there's a link to my website in the Instagram profile, by the way. So.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah, everybody, if you're watching this, go to, live right now or whenever you check it out, go check out Niklas's stuff, because he's putting it all out there for you for free. Give him a follow. Tell your friends about him. It's always the best way to share things.
Totally.
And thanks so much for hanging out with us.
Totally.
Thanks for having
that
me.
was great. And Harlan and I, we have a if you're watching this, we have a live play D&D game on this very channel. It's set in the Spelljammer world. That's every Monday night at 7:00 Pacific time.
That's it.
And yeah, we do that. We do that every Monday night. If you're watching this and want to check that out. And I think that's it, right?
Yeah, you got a big old bar of bad guys to get through tomorrow. So
Oh yeah, it's
I'm
probably.
I
I'm
might
dreading
throw
it.
an extra trap in there now, because this is great.
No,
it's got my
it's
brain working.
A bar trap, yeah. The
I think
bathroom
bars are just
stall that
traps
falls into a
themselves.
pit. Yeah, I feel like it was already a pretty good trap, but
Cool. All right.
cool. Thanks a lot, Niklas. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for your
Thanks,
question.
guys.
We'll see you next episode. And tip your DM
Don't forget.
if you can. Thanks.
Tip your DMs.
Bye.
All right. See y'all.
Bye.
Bye.